From the Gospel according to John, 10th chapter, starting in verse 11. Jesus said, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, who is not the shepherd, does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and runs away. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. The hired hand runs away because a hired hand does not care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock, one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I laid down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father." May God add a blessing to this reading. Amen. All right, so I may have mentioned when I was in college, I got an opportunity. I had, in my senior year in January, we had a January term. I got to take about 3 weeks and travel to China, which was an incredible experience. And actually, one of the last nights that we were there, we were in a city a little more inland than where we had been most of the trip, and we were in a city called Chengdu. And in Chengdu, it's one of those cities that you may or may not have heard of, but at that time there were, I think, 6 million people living in there, and there's probably 10 million or more now. So it was not a small city by any stretch of the imagination. But because it was further inland and because there wasn't a lot of tourist kind of things, there was no major attraction to see there. We were there to visit a university and to listen to and study some of the local music. But what was interesting about being in that place is because we were some of the only visitors, people weren't accustomed to seeing tourists or outsiders, and we very much felt like there was nothing that sort of catered to a visitor. No signs in different kinds of languages. We were not likely to encounter any English-speaking people as shopkeepers and in restaurants and things that you might find in places like Hong Kong or Beijing. And so we were in this massive city, and we were told that for dinner that night, we're going to have some free time, but for dinner that night, to make sure that we would all meet up again at the top of this tall building in downtown. And it was the tallest building in the city, and it had a restaurant on the top floor. And for a special thing for our group, we were going to get to eat dinner up there. So have fun, wander around, explore the city, but always keep in mind that you can see that tower and that restaurant at the top, because wherever you are, just follow the street to that tower, take the elevator up. We'll meet up there at 5 o'clock tonight. Well, that sounded great. And I was enjoying wandering around, and I even split up from some of my pals that I was hanging out with because I was interested in venturing down this way and they were going to go that way, and it all felt very good and safe and secure and nice. And then this fog rolled through, a very, very thick fog. And at some point in going in and out of shops or in and out of displays or a museum, I came out and I looked right and I looked left and I looked in front of me and behind me, and no sign of this building. It's like when you go to New York City for the first time and you go in the subway and you come up and you think, well, if I can't see the Empire State Building and I can't see the Hudson and I can't see the East River, I don't know where in the world I am or which direction is uptown or downtown, right? It's the same kind of sensation, and I had that and I didn't know what to do. And I was not scared, but I was uncomfortable. Because this was one of the first times in my life that I could not ask for help. I could not read signage. This was pre-cell phone maps. This was a pocket map probably wouldn't have done me any good. And I was totally at the mercy of being able to be within sight of this building that I could no longer see. Now, I eventually got there, found my way somehow, and took the elevator up and met up with the group again. But it is an unnerving kind of experience to feel separated, to feel that level of sort of being on your own, that isolation. In some ways, it might be exhilarating, but at other times it feels more concerning or even threatening. This passage that I just read and that Amanda was referencing to from John, it's one of the places where we use this shepherd imagery. Jesus uses a shepherd motif to talk about himself. In fact, in the verses right before this, he talks about him being the sheep gate, and then now the metaphor transitions into I am the shepherd, I am the good shepherd, and the sheep know my voice, and I care for them, and the hired hand who feels like he's not the shepherd, he's not the owner of the sheep, he is entrusted with the sheep but doesn't have the same level of care for the sheep. And it's interesting, all these little nuances, and you ask yourself, Jesus, what exactly are you getting at in this text? And it's a text that is supposed to be, it's assigned in terms of the church year and the readings that go along with the church year. It's assigned for this Sunday, which happens just a few weeks after Easter. So why in the world is this the text, and why is this the text for today? And what is Jesus talking about? And as I was reading through it, I stopped and I noticed something that I don't think I had paid attention to in the past. He talks about this hired hand who's entrusted with caring for the sheep, and everything is good when it comes to having the hired hand manage the flock, the people who are temporarily charged with caring for the flock. It's all well and good until there's a threat. And he talks about the wolf that comes. And the wolf comes and he snatches the sheep. And then he says something interesting. If I was just asking you, what is the threat that a wolf represents to a herd of sheep? Even without being an experienced rancher or a farmer or a shepherd, I think you would say the sheep its life is being threatened, right? The wolf is there for a meal. The wolf is there as a predator. The wolf is there to claim territory. The wolf is there to show who's boss. I don't know, but the sheep's life is being threatened, right? That's what we think. The wolf comes in, the wolf kills. The wolf snatches and kills. It drags the sheep outside of the flock and it mauls it somewhere. But that's, interestingly, and this is the part that sort of tripped me up this time, that's not what Jesus says is the threat. Listen to what Jesus says again. The wolf snatches them up and scatters them. And scatters them. I looked through half a dozen different translations of the Bible, and I went back to this particular phrase, and I want to see what it says. Is the word kill used ever? And I couldn't find a single example of a translation that didn't use scatters. We lock in on that word because it's interesting that Jesus says, when he's talking about his flock, that the primary threat to their existence is not life or death, but whether they're together or whether they're separated. Whether they're a unit or whether they're isolated. Scattering is the concern that Jesus has for his flock. I think we could think of all kinds of different parallels for that in our time, couldn't we? We talk about the world, our culture, especially in the Western world, that there has never been a time when so many people identified as feeling isolated or loneliness. We've never been more connected in some ways, and yet we've never felt more lonely. We recognize that the threats that loneliness poses to our physical and our emotional well-being include things like depression and anxiety. Taken even further, they represent things like heart issues, the risk of stroke. These are well-documented and researched things within the scientific and the medical community that said that we are not meant to live in separation. And isn't it fascinating that 2,000 years before our time, Jesus is saying that I am the good shepherd and the threat is the wolf who comes and scatters us, not actually our lives being at risk. Our lives being at risk may be later on down the chain, but the immediate threat is scattering. If we look at the passage that comes right before this, in the previous chapter, in the 9th chapter of John, what happens is Jesus is with his disciples and he comes across a man who is blind, and this is the passage you may remember. It's the ewe passage when you're a kid where Jesus spits in the ground and in the mud, and then he rubs it on the blind man's eyes, and then he's able to see. And what he tells this man is, you are freed now. You are able to see. And the blind man runs off and he goes and he tells the religious leaders, which is what he should do. There's another passage where Jesus cures some people with leprosy, and he goes, now show yourself to the leaders of the faith. Because in Jesus' time, remember, if you had something like blindness from birth, it was probably what was believed to be something that your parents did as a sin that has been passed on to you. And so you are unclean or ritually impure in some ways. And so if you go show yourselves to the leaders of the religious community, they have the ability to say, okay, welcome back into the fold. Welcome back into the flock. You are a member in good standing now because you are clean. So this man does exactly what he would have done, anybody would have done in his case. He can see again. He goes off to tell people. And when he tells people, he runs into some Pharisees and they say, so tell me what happened. And they say, well, the Jesus guy, Jesus of Nazareth, Jesus from Galilee. He made me able to see again. And the Pharisees say, now wait a minute. That doesn't quite compute. And wait, when was this? Well, it was on Saturday. He did this on the Sabbath? Ooh. Well, we might have thought he was a gift and a blessing from God, but now if he is violating the Sabbath, he is not that. He is, in fact, against the teachings. And so it's this very complicated thing, but we see between all of these different sects, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Essenes, all of these different sects that were around within Judaism in Jesus' time, everybody's got the right way to do things. Everybody's got the right way to observe the faith. Everybody's got the right rules to follow. And each one's just a little bit different than the other one. And what's end up happening is people say, well, I'm in this camp, or I'm in this camp, or I'm in this camp. And what do you know? The flock has been scattered. And Jesus is there, and he's saying, but I represent the Good Shepherd. The hired hands, a.k.a. the religious leaders of the time, are those who are maybe well-intended, but actually scattering, because they are creating these divisions within the flock. And then he said there are other sheep that aren't even in the fold yet that I'm going to bring into the fold. And some people have interpreted that to mean, fast forward a few years, when the Gentiles, then, the non-Jews, get incorporated into the early church. But the message is clear. Regardless of how we might have these different nuanced interpretations, the message is clear. Jesus says that the threat is the scattering. And as we fast forward now through 2,000 years of church history, my goodness, we have continued the scattering. This week marks the beginning in the United Methodist Church of the 2024 General Conference. That's the once every 4-year global gathering, which didn't happen in 2020 because of that thing, COVID. And so now we're even more delayed in this time of meeting together. And we have had seismic change and epic scattering since our last global gathering. We've had divisions and disaffiliations and new autonomous churches that were once United Methodists and new denominations that started up. And I'm not even going to say who's right and who's wrong and point fingers. I just think that it grieves Jesus, even if with good intentions, we have found ourselves more and more scattered. And I'm thankful that at least in our better moments, the people of Grace, a United Methodist congregation, recognize that there is a lot of difference within this body of faith and this community we have as a church. Different communities, different professions, different backgrounds, different origin stories as far as our faith formation and experience, different ideas about what's best for our world and our country and our church, our denomination. I sat in a small group today where we had some discussions about some current events, and there were different ideas exchanged, but the important part was that those differences didn't scatter us further. The joy in that moment was the coming together and the being able to be in community, guided by the thing that matters most, and that is the guidance of the Good Shepherd, whose voice we follow, whose presence we yearn for. That guiding voice that says, this is what it means to be community, this is what it means to be church. When I think about what should be our response in the United Methodist Church, well, I hope certainly that this general conference will be one that feels more unifying than any that have taken place in my lifetime. I know we've got big issues and huge topics and lots to sort out, and it's complicated because we are a truly global assembly of people. But I also think that we've seen the harm that is caused by scattering upon scattering upon scattering, and what we yearn for is an opportunity to come together again, to unify around the Good Shepherd and his hope for humanity. When it comes to us individually, I think what we need to do is be on guard. Be on guard for the forces at work that are seeking to separate us and scatter us further. The ones that say, you got to pick this or that, us or them, him or me. If you're not for us, you're against us. Those kinds of voices that continue to sow seeds of division, which just continue to plague us. Those voices that say, the answer to our problems is further distancing ourselves from others, especially those who we might disagree with, or those who are not like us, or those who don't share everything in common. And we've gotten so adept at following those kinds of voices that now simple things that rub us the wrong way cause us to walk the other direction. We leave organizations and institutions and communities and groups and friend circles because something bothered us, so we're gone. And we say, to heck with it. I'm right, they're wrong, I burn it all down behind me. And I'm not saying that these things don't come from a place of passion and taking a strong stand and standing up for what we believe in, and that we should just, everything's okay, I'm okay, you're okay, you can sell out your beliefs. No, I'm not saying that at all. But I am saying that if we look at our track record of solving our problems by continuing to distance ourselves and scatter ourselves further and divorce ourselves from this or that, I don't think that got us to a healthier place. And I sure don't think that Jesus is encouraging us to do that very thing. Let me say one more time. When Jesus talked about the threat to the flock, it was the wolf who comes in and doesn't kill, but scatters. That's the word he chose. That should make a difference to us. So be on guard. Where is the temptation? Where are the voices? Where are the forces that say scattering is the best option? And when you encounter those, instead, be thinking of, where can the flock grow in number? Where can there be greater unity? Where can there be invitation and participation? Where can there be inclusion? And I think that these are the things that Jesus would have us search for. These are the motivations of the shepherd that says, I will leave the entire flock to go after the one. Those who are attuned will hear the sound of my voice and be drawn in, and those who are too unaware to know what's going on, I will go after and bring them in myself. When I got to the top floor of that office tower and the elevator doors opened, I looked on the faces of a dozen or so concerned classmates who saw me and said my name with relief in their voices. I don't think that they were seriously worried for my well-being, but they were concerned that I was not with the group at the designated time, just as I was. And what sweet relief it was to hear my name being called, to be brought back into the fold, even in such a low-stakes kind of example. Let's reach out to one another. Let's call others by name, inviting them into the flock, despite the differences that we might have. Because I'm certain, while it may not be easy and we may not have all of the right answers, and it may not be without some struggle, that inclusion is the antithesis of scattering. And we seek to draw the circle wider, to increase the flock, to bring in all into the kingdom of Jesus Christ, as we, in these days after Easter, continue to share his good news. Will you pray with me?